Hello, 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 everyone. Today is your friendly neighborhood quick Christian, and today is the Friday word. So, we are in a new year, 2024. Whew, that sounds like space agey, right? 2024, right? Amen. So, with new year comes new hair. Oh, how you liking it? Wow. Amen. Okay, let's get right on into it. Mark 6:31. Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place, and you will find rest. Now, I want to start off with that because as we move into the new year, New Year's is really a time of like contemplation and reflection, amen. And one of the things I think about when we think about 2020, just 4 years ago, amen, one of the things that came out of 2020 was the Great Resignation. And not just a Great Resignation, but a whole shifting. There was a cultural shift that happened during that time. Part of it was the George Floyd effect, and part of it was that Great Resignation, right? But those two things happened because people had time, right? The reflection of how our culture was moving forward, how things were looking, institutions or ways of being that no longer had a real place in the present world, and many will argue probably never had a place in the present world, right? But those things happened because people had time. They had time to protest. They had time to think about their lives. They had times to think about, like, what am I doing? Why am I living this way? Why am I going to a job that I detest? Right? Why am I doing things and working and just going around in a wheel that doesn't even get me anywhere? All these things were able to happen because of 2020 and because they had time. When we think of the movie Metropolis, the silent film, one of the things that sticks out to Metropolis that they point out is the assembly line, right? And the thing is, the idea is that if you keep people moving, if you keep them distracted, they won't see what's happening around them. And it's a tactic that's used. That's what they use in casinos. That's why you don't see a lot of lights. That's why they don't have clocks in there, right? All these sort of things to sort of keep you focused on the one thing, right? Now, I'm not here to dismiss capitalism. That's not what this is about. But it's more in the fact of like how people were able to realize what in their own lives was working and not working. But the only reason they were able to do that is because they had that quiet time, the quiet place. And as it says in Mark 6:31, come with me by yourselves, right? You don't bring family, you don't bring your children, you don't bring your partner, you don't bring anyone else. Come with me by yourselves to the quiet place, and you will find some rest. And that's why it's so important for us to have that time with God, because it's in that silence, it's in that quiet place that we can hear the voice of God. Right? When we think about Martin Luther King as he was on the Selma Bridge, the first time he went over, right? It was the second time for many others, but it was the first time he went over, he stopped. Not even one quarter into the march. Right? And people are thinking this is going to be the event, is all the cameras are there and they're ready. And he stopped. He took a moment. He reflected. And he listened for the voice of God, and he knew it wasn't the right time to go. And he turned. Now, that caused a lot of flack, because at that time, his approval rating was already being challenged, right? Because that's how people just do, right? But he was already in a place where he was already being questioned. And so I want to read here Isaiah 30:21. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." Right? Left to the right, right? And this is Isaiah speaking to the Jews, right? Saying that no matter what you do, if you listen and you rely on God, you will hear that voice right behind you, right? And that's a living example of Martin Luther King, right? He took that time, and regardless of people on the side of him saying, I don't know how you couldn't have done it, blah, 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 you can only imagine, right? But he kept focused. It was like, there's one voice I need to hear because something doesn't feel right. But it was in that sensitivity, right? It is in that place. That's why he had to take a moment. If he had allowed the voices to come in, if he had not taken that moment, he might have made a really tragically bad decision. Amen? And so it is in that sort of place where we're able to commune with God. and to have that special place. I want to read here Psalm 62:5. Yes, my soul finds rest in God. My hope comes from Him. Right? Again, that quiet place when we allow our soul to have rest with God. We allow that sensitivity so we can hear the voice to say, what do I do next, Lord? The importance of silence and the importance of that place of intimacy, right? It is in the intimacy, true intimacy comes, right? That's a parent with a child, right? When you see a mother with their newborn, it's that moment of just being able to look into their eyes, right? You see a owner with their pet, right? And when that pet looks into their eyes, right? There is that moment, that communing, that place of silence, right? It's when that new love or love you've had for many years, when you're able to just look at each other and know. That is a special intimacy, right? But that happens in silence. Now, don't get me wrong, the turn up is always important. There's a place and a time. But when you want to build that true relationship, when you want to be able to really hear people, right? There's sometimes when people have partners who they trust, whether it's business partners, and sometimes they'll just turn to them and look at them, and there's an eye they give them. They can be like, okay, we're on the same page, right? They don't have to say anything because they've built that kind of intimacy in their relationship, right? But intimacy is built in that quiet time, in that quiet place, where again you can hear that voice of God, where you can really be able to know. One of the things I realized as I've grown in my relationship with God is, and I've always had a relationship, but as I have grown more intimate, I used to love shows like Snapped and everything on Oxygen, all those true crime kind of things. I would watch the marathons, and then it got to a point where I couldn't anymore. Now again, I'm not if you like them, it's all good. It's all good in the hood, amen. But for myself, I realized it just felt wrong. I was like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like this is not building me. And I realized when I needed those shows, it was something in myself. There was something that was lacking, something that I was needing. I was usually not in the best place, right? And it was able to hear that, to know that, to feel that sensitivity. As you build that relationship and as you're able to hear, it won't always be like a voice. I know for some, it may be, they actually hear words, but for myself, that's not how I experience it. For every person, it's going to be different. But it's sometimes a feeling. All of a sudden, you go down a certain road. Many people call it intuition, right? And I'm not saying intuition and two are different or the same, right? But I had a sense of like intuition, like, well, all of a sudden where it becomes much stronger, where you're going down a road and all of a sudden that doesn't feel the right thing to do, right? All of a sudden you reach for food and the feeling is so strong, you know it's just not right to do, right? Or you're gonna make a call and all of a sudden it's like, no, that's not it. Or you don't want to make a call and all of a sudden the pressure, do it. This is the thing you should be going for. This is the person you should be talking to, right? But all that builds over time, but it builds in the sensitivity. You'll come to a place where all of a sudden you hear a song and you read a line in the book where all of a sudden you read before, but all of a sudden it will hit in a different way and you will see things in a different way, right? But again, it's in that building that relationship. I want to leave us with James. And I'm reading this in the New International Version. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in what they do. Right? And also in James talks about perseverance, let it finish its work. Right? Let perseverance finish its work. And again, when you need that wisdom is to ask God, but to ask God, you have to then know how I've been answered. Amen. And that can only be built when you have that intimate relationship. Because here as it says, such a person is double-minded, right? Because if you're saying one thing, but not allowing that place of intimacy, not allowing that sensitivity, not coming by yourselves to the quiet place, right? Because again, that's vulnerability. Right? If you're not letting yourself be vulnerable to the voice of God, then whose voice do you listen to? Because the ego has a place, and I'm not one of those people that think the ego is evil. I am not of that philosophy. But I believe that the ego has its place, And then the vulnerability has its place. But when you want to hear the voice of God, the ego is not the most useful place, right? You really want to lean into your vulnerability. Amen. I hope this was useful for someone. There won't be prayer chat tomorrow, but I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.